I know this may be a shock to some, but sports are really unpredictable. The aspect of variation in performance, player chemistry, and team building decisions leave room for a lot of possible outcomes. However, there's one thing that happens every year that you can safely expect one way or another, and that's Dennis Schroeder changing teams. Since being drafted by the Hawks way back in 2013, Schroeder has either been traded or signed with a new franchise a staggering 11 times, including 3 times in just the last year alone. It's a fascinating case of a player who is clearly productive enough to have value on the market, but not quite impactful enough to warrant a team building around him. Today, we're going to rank every stop of Dennis Schroeder's career from worst to best, and try to figure out why he hasn't been able to find a permanent home despite the many suitors. The most underwhelming stretch of Dennis Schroeder's career came this past season with the Golden State Warriors. The Dubs lost guard depth early last season when DeAnthony Melton went down with a torn ACL. Mike Dunleavy decided to trade for our favorite journeyman in December of last year after he greatly exceeded expectations with Brooklyn. On paper, it made a ton of sense, as the Warriors desperately needed someone else aside from Steph Curry to anchor the offense. However, playing for Golden State requires you to fit into their unorthodox motion offense, which has resulted in issues for a number of different players over the years. And ultimately, Dennis was another example of this. As someone who was used to having the ball in his hands plenty during his time with the Nets, this was a really difficult adjustment for him to make in the middle of the season. These struggles getting acclimated led to career worst numbers, as Schroeder posted his lowest scoring number in over a decade on a career low 37% from the field. After just 23 games, the Warriors decided to cut their losses and send him to the Jazz as part of the massive Jimmy Butler deal, although he didn't end up playing in Utah, as they almost immediately rerouted him to the Pistons. All in all, this was a partnership where the styles clearly didn't match and were thrown together on short notice, leading to the worst possible results. While his stint with the Warriors was the most underwhelming, his month and a half with the Houston Rockets was by far the most forgettable. The Celtics traded Dennis Schroeder to the Rockets at the trade deadline in 2022 to acquire backup big man Daniel Tice. And like I previously mentioned, you would have missed this stint if you blinked. He only appeared in 15 games for Houston before being shut down for a quote-unquote shoulder injury at the end of March. His numbers were pretty mediocre here, on par with his time with Golden State. The only thing that keeps this from being the last spot is the fact that there were absolutely no expectations when he came to this team, since they were actively tanking. He wasn't really being relied on for anything, unlike his time with the Warriors. Because of this, his Houston stint comes in at second to last. Coming in at number 8, we have his 51 games with the Toronto Raptors. After narrowly missing out on the playoffs in 2023, Toronto tried to remain competitive in the East by replacing their longtime point guard Fred VanVleet with Dennis Schroeder. While Fred is undoubtedly a better player than Dennis is, the organization thought Scottie Barnes could take a leap in his third season and offset this negative replacement. This was partially true. Barnes did in fact make some great strides, as he was selected to his first All-Star team. In addition, Dennis did about as well as you could have possibly asked, averaging a super steady 13 points and 6 assists per game on above average shooting splits by his standards. However, these two were in fact not able to keep the Raptors afloat, as they were 15 games under 500 during this time. As a result, Toronto decided to hit the rebuild button in the middle of the season. During an absolute fire sale where they gutted pretty much their whole team, the Raptors ended up trading Schroeder to the Nets in a salary dump. All in all, he was super solid during his time here. External circumstances just led to this stint being too brief to be any higher on this list. Dennis Schroeder's time with the Celtics is very polarizing. Boston famously traded for Derek White at the trade deadline in 2022, the same time they also traded Schroeder away to the Rockets to get under the luxury tax. The narrative is that the Celtics became a perennial contender immediately when Derek White arrived, but that isn't exactly true. The start of the 2022 season was in fact very shaky for Boston, but they did start to figure it out right around the turn of the new year. They went 13-6 from January 1st to the time he was traded, and were really starting to look like a serious team. Overall, Boston had a 28-21 record when Schroeder played, which is a respectable 47-win pace. During this time, Dennis put up his usual 14 points and 4 assists. This is the first instance on this list where he was actually contributing to a winning basketball team. But like the ones we talked about before, his time here was just too short to put it any higher. Although his stint was shorter than his time with the Raptors and Celtics, Schroeder's key role in Detroit's ascension last season warrants this coming ahead of the previous two. After being leaned on a bit too heavily in a role that didn't quite fit him in Golden State, Dennis landed with the Pistons during the back half of last season, where he was perfectly slotted as the sixth man. Instead of being relied upon as a focal point, he was able to strictly come in and focus on defense. Any added offense was simply a bonus. Once he arrived, Detroit immediately took off. They were an even 500 in games he didn't play, but were 17-11 in games where he did suit up. Even though his time here was short-lived, they will absolutely miss his services in 2026. This might be the most infamous stint of his career. The Lakers followed up their championship in 2020 by retooling a bit, parting with some of their older veterans in favor of some younger, more exciting talent like Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell. At first, it worked like a dream. Dennis was thriving in his role as a full-time starter. Even though Anthony Davis was in and out of the lineup all year due to injury, Dennis was essentially the de facto second option alongside LeBron, and the Lakers were sitting right at the top of the Western Conference. It was around this time when LA reportedly offered Schroeder a 4-year, $84 million extension. Since he thought he could get more on the open market once free agency opened, Dennis and his team denied this deal and asked if the two sides could pick up conversations again after the season. But this is precisely where everything hit the fan. Almost immediately afterwards, LeBron and AD both missed extensive time as the Lakers fell all the way down to the play-in. They narrowly got out of that and then went up against the Suns in the first round. LA was up 2-1 at home when Anthony Davis got hurt in Game 4, which essentially took him out of the series. The team really needed Schroeder to step up and help close out Phoenix, but he just couldn't live up to the moment as the Lakers ended up falling in 6 games. This lackluster performance led to the Lakers rescinding their original offer, and has led to Dennis bouncing around from team to team ever since. It probably wouldn't have gone down this way, but if he accepted the 4-year deal back in February of 2021, he would have been scheduled to be a free agent for the first time during this past offseason. Instead, he signed 4 contracts since then. While this is undoubtedly one of the more forgettable entries on the list, it's really underrated when you take a closer look. After the Raptors sold the farm and got rid of everybody, Dennis Schroeder ended up on the Nets, who were going absolutely nowhere at the time. There was pretty much nothing for Dennis to play for at this time in his career, except to prove himself to other potential teams who might be interested in trading for him. And that's exactly what he did. During his brief 52-game Nets career that spanned just over 10 months, he put up really solid numbers, especially during the beginning of the 2025 season, where he averaged 18 points and 6 assists per game on nearly 40% shooting from 3. It was precisely this strong performance that led to Golden State taking a chance on him. As we just mentioned, Dennis's first go-around with the Lakers ended on a very sour note, but this one in 2023 was much better, largely due to the same reason as his time in Detroit. He was slotted correctly. When Dennis came back to LA in 2023, he was a part of a crowded backcourt that consisted of him and Austin Reeves. On top of that, Russell Westbrook was also in the rotation to begin the year, until he was shipped out and replaced by D'Angelo Russell at the trade deadline. Despite the surplus at his position, Schroeder remained a key piece to the team, playing over 30 minutes a night. During his time on the floor, he had a knack for coming up huge when the Lakers needed him the most, making big plays time and time again throughout the season. Most notably, he hit the game-winning 3 during the play-in tournament, which kickstarted LA's eventual run to the conference finals. Even though his counting numbers were nothing crazy, Dennis proved that he was worth well above the veteran minimum during this season, which is ironically why he didn't end up re-signing with Los Angeles. He was quite simply worth more than what they could offer. The only true long-time stint of Dennis Schroeder's career came during his first 5 seasons with the Atlanta Hawks, and it honestly set the stage for the rest of his story. Dennis came in as a rookie during the 2014 season and played sparingly for Atlanta. The Hawks were nothing special, as they snuck into the postseason as a 38-win team in the East. Things really took off for him though in 2015, where he became the 6th man and played a key role for Atlanta as they won a franchise record 60 games. From this point, it was clear that he had starter potential, and he wasn't going to be backing up Jeff Teague for much longer. But by the time he finally got his chance to be a full-time starter, the team around him regressed quite a bit. Atlanta wasn't particularly good in 2017, but Schroeder was incredible during the team's first round loss to the Wizards. He put up 25 and 8 on over 40% from 3 in the losing effort, which was by far the best series of his career. This continued on into the 2018 season, where he once again put up strong numbers. However, Atlanta missed the playoffs for the first time in his career. It was clear that the Hawks couldn't field a true contender with Schroeder as the lead option. As a result, they hit the reset button and truly kicked off their rebuild by dumping Schroeder off to the Thunder, which is where we'll wrap up this list. We finally reached our last stop. The best stint of Dennis Schroeder's career came during his 2-year stretch with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like I just mentioned, Dennis couldn't quite hack it as the face of a franchise, but he was still undoubtedly talented. When Atlanta landed the 3rd pick in the 2018 draft lottery, they decided to move on from their longtime point guard and traded him to OKC for Carmelo Anthony, who was immediately waived. Melo's brief tenure with the Thunder was an absolute disaster, largely because he wasn't willing to accept a smaller role to help the team win. But this is exactly what Schroeder did, and he thrived in it. While he was relegated to a bench role, he was still playing 30+ minutes a night and was super productive as the team's 3rd option on offense. Even though he didn't start, he often found himself on the floor to close out games, playing alongside PG and Russ. It was such a breath of fresh air for OKC to have another ball handler aside from Westbrook, because during those first 2 seasons post-KD, they had absolutely zero other options until Dennis came. Even though the Thunder flamed out during the playoffs, Dennis played his part about as well as you could have asked him to. In the ultimate case of irony, Schroeder actually remained on the roster despite OKC completely blowing it up the following offseason. They traded away pretty much their entire team, including Russell Westbrook and Paul George. In return, the Thunder got a promising young prospect in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, what was thought to be a washed-up Chris Paul, and a journeyman Danilo Gallinari. This team was expected to be absolutely horrible and had zero expectations going into the 2020 season. But they somehow earned a top 4 seed in the West. Remember these guys that I mentioned before? They turned out to be a four-headed monster, as all of them averaged at least 17 points a game. This was the only time in Dennis's career where he was a true cornerstone of a serious team. He had by far the best scoring season of his career, as he finished second in Sixth Man of the Year voting. Overall, it was a really random, magical season, and Dennis being at the center of OKC's resurgence was not something anybody expected. It's unfortunate that they only got one season together, because Schroeder absolutely thrived alongside Shai and CP3. And from this point forward, we haven't seen Dennis play more than one full season with any of the teams he's been on since. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you think of my list, and leave anything I got wrong in the comments. Be sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.